Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to the next part in our Elite Texas webinar series. We're excited to have a great presentation today on using technology to help streamline core curriculum assessment. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. If y'all need anything, I'll be here in chat. Thank you all for presenting today.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for everyone attending our webinar. As Jeff said, we're going to be speaking today about assessment and in particular emphasizing a system we've come up with to really help streamline working from collecting data in courses to creating year-end reports. And I am Sarah Malillo, Senior Director of Core Curriculum and Science at the American Women's College, which is a division of BayPath, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Michelle McGrath, and I am the Senior Academic Director of our Psychology program at the American Women's College.
And I'm Emily Thompson, and I'm the Director of Writing, Communications, and Arts and Humanities at the American Women's College.
Just a quick overview here at the beginning of what we plan to go through. We'll start by telling you a little bit about us in case you're not familiar with the American Women's College, and then a quick introduction to program assessment. I'm sure many of those of you attending today are familiar with that, but we'll recap some challenges which may also be familiar to you. Then we'll dive into our approach to using technology and the system that we've come up with. And round out with some conclusions and takeaways.
So to begin, we wanted to provide a little bit of institutional context of the American Women's College. As Sarah mentioned, we are a division of BayPath University, which is a small liberal arts college in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. There's three main divisions. We have the American Women's College, which is about 90% online. And we do offer some hybrid courses on Saturday as well. But we also have a graduate division as well as a traditional residential program on campus. Our student population is about 1,600, and we serve adult female students. It's a very diverse population with a high need. So many of our students are Pell eligible. We operate from a centralized course model, and this will be discussed further in the presentation, but essentially during our curriculum design process, we create a master course shell, which is then taught by a variety of our instructors. We currently offer about 40 bachelor's and certificate degrees. Next slide. This is an example. We work off of the what we call the SOUL model, which is our social online universal learning model. And the six main tenets of this model are pictured here. The first being Soul Connect at the top. And Soul Connect is our intentional onboarding for students. So we have a robust orientation program that all of our students go through before starting our program. Accelerated pace. We offer 6-week courses and 6 sessions per year. So there's a lot of content covered in a short amount of time. Soul KP represents our adaptive platform. We currently have about 25% of our catalog in an adaptive platform, which really helps us to customize the learning experience for our students. Wraparound support, we have a robust team of individuals, including academic advisors who work to support our students. Soul communities, we have a variety of different virtual learning communities for our students, and we break it out by discipline, so students have the opportunity to connect with one another across majors. And Soul Connect for Educators represents some of our training opportunities to help develop our faculty. And we also have a faculty development committee designed specifically to work on opportunities to work on their training. Next slide.
So I'm just going to do a quick overview of just foundational questions around program assessment and provide some basic information about how we approach program assessment. So as we know, program assessment is founded on systematically gathering, analyzing, and interpreting data to improve student learning. And it's not just about asking questions of student performance, but it's also about asking questions about our curricular performance and our faculty performance. And so we're not only focused on whether evidence of student learning matches our expectations of what we want them to learn, but we're also asking how effectively our curriculum and our pedagogical methods align with the learning outcomes to facilitate student learning. So we're asking, how can we improve the teaching of this program? Do the assignments that we're using in assessment align with how they're being assessed? Questions like that. Next slide. And so this is just a basic graphic of how we approach the alignment of our learning outcomes. Effective and viable program assessment has to be grounded on alignment from every level. It needs to be transparently mapped out so that various internal and external stakeholders know how programmatic curriculum fits together and supports the university's outcome and mission. So it starts from the global level of the university outcomes that that state graduates of this university will be competent in XYZ, and it goes all the way down to the assignment level outcomes in individual courses. So what students learn during an individual assignment is clearly mapped and aligned with what they're learning in the course as a whole, which is clearly mapped and aligned with what they're learning across their program, their degree program, and then what they're gaining from their degree program is mapped to the university competencies. So having this transparent system of alignment not only ensures the viability of your program assessment method, but it's also effective for communicating that to internal and external stakeholders of your assessment. Next slide. So why do we do program assessment? As I mentioned, it's obviously about student success. That should be the #1 concern. We want to make sure that students are actually learning what we want them to learn. It's a vital tool for continuous improvement to our curriculum, programmatic structures, our pedagogical methods. We want to make sure that we're using this data in an actionable way that can show us how and where we can improve and further support student learning. And as I said, it's also important for transparency to internal and external stakeholders, not just for accreditation purposes, but also just to create a culture of accountability to ourselves and to our students for institutional effectiveness and institutional performance. Next slide. And it is a cyclical process, an ever-evolving process based on the data that you gather. Our assessment cycle follows a backward design process where student learning outcomes at every level are driving the curricular and the pedagogical decisions. So aligned learning outcomes are our starting point for establishing our assessment questions, building our assessment plans, and we leverage our learning management system, Canvas, to facilitate course embedded assessment that allows us to standardize our assessment methods across sections of a course. And all our data is collected digitally through rubrics in our LMS Canvas that then feed into a data dashboard. And this further facilitates our interpretation and analysis of that data. And it also helps us make decisions about changes that are as informed as possible by this effective data gathering so that we can close the loop on the assessment cycle, which is an important but challenging step to the process. Next slide. And so some of the big challenges that we've encountered mostly revolve around, not only the logistics of just gathering our data, because as I mentioned, we leverage our LMS to help us with that, but mostly the biggest just challenges for us have been about what to do with the data after we collect it, especially how to make our analysis of that data meaningful, both to us and to other teams on campus who need our assessment data to make decisions and to to potentially change elements of how they do things. And I think the biggest challenge along with that is also resisting to the urge to be too reactionary to your data. You don't want to make decisions based on, you know, invalid data or a data that has not been collected in a longitudinal enough time. So some of these challenges are mitigated by our LMS system and by our centralized curriculum model, like making sure that things are more standardized across course sections. But yeah, I think those challenges still exist, and I'm sure that you all have experienced that as well. Next slide.
So as Emily introduced, we wanted to show how we've structured the system within our LMS, which we use Canvas, to help us overcome some of these challenges and really reduce the burden that assessment often is thought to propose. That way, if we make the process easier, hopefully we'll be more likely to close the loop and really make those changes to improve our curriculum. So I'm just showing an example screenshot here of from Canvas, but I do understand from our IT staff that all of the major LMSs, Moodle, Blackboard, D2L, whatever you may use, my understanding is that they all have this functionality, so it might look a little bit different, but could be worth a conversation with your own IT staff if you're interested in trying to set this up. So what you're seeing here is just at the highest level within Canvas's organization, the rubrics section that's devoted to the American Women's College, and this is just a snapshot of a few of them that are listed. And that's the first step, is to, well, after deciding what rubric you're going to use, we're using AACU rubrics. Here, I'll toggle to the next one, is an example of the quantitative literacy value rubric, which has been entered into Canvas. Looks a little different than the way you see it on AACU's website, but it's the same content. So the various criteria and then the ratings and the levels for each of those criteria. And so the first step is to get this all programmed and saved in the LMS so that it's accessible to faculty and or whoever, assessment coordinator, whoever is conducting the assessment. And then in Canvas anyway, there is a need to link that rubric to the course that you want to use it in. So after the rubrics are made available in the LMS, then I'm showing here just an example of a particular course where the quantitative literacy rubric is used. This is the low-level statistics class that we collect some, you know, or is a common gen ed core course that students select, sorry, for their degree programs. And so we use the quantitative literacy rubric as a part of assessing this course and a part of our core curriculum in general. To actually do the assessment, Canvas is a little quirky perhaps. You can't assign 2 rubrics to one assignment. So I'm skipping over the fact that I've already decided which assignment in the course I'm going to use for assessment. It's shown here, the final project. And that project already has a rubric associated with it. So what we've had to do is toggle back and forth between the assignment that the student submitted as a part of their regular work, and then the value rubric that we're selecting to use for assessment of that assignment. So that's the purpose of showing you these 2 screenshots, just to highlight that. Would be really cool if Canvas could come up with a feature to allow multiple rubrics to be associated with one assignment, but maybe other LMSs have that ability. And then to me, the best part of this process, once you have your assignments identified, the rubrics programs, everything linked and hooked up, is downloading the data. So once you go through and use the rubric that's shown here, then you can download in bulk all of the students, or not all the students, all of the assessment data, and use it, really flexibly to report out whatever your needs are for accreditation, for internal reporting needs, for your own understanding of your program. This is the raw data, so it looks a little bit messy, and I have hidden private student information, so it would look a little bit different perhaps on your computer, but it's just all the raw data that was entered from the rubric as the assessment was processed. So as an example for you, this is one way that the data could be analyzed. I'm showing here just one of the criteria from the quantitative literacy value rubric, the application and analysis one. I had data downloaded from 91 students, and I broke them out by rank. So really easy to manipulate Excel to do this for me. Came up with the percent of students in each rank. And then for our university's reporting process, we're looking for students earning a 3 or 4, the highest mastery levels. And so I could quickly calculate that was 50%, 57% of our students. Perhaps some work to do there and to get more students into the higher levels of achievement for that criterion. And, this can all be done in a matter of minutes. And so this is just one example, but could be done for all of the criteria in the rubric and multiple course sections all at once, depending on what your needs are.
All right.
So
go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Michelle. So our next step is, and final step in the process, is closing the loop. And for us, that revolves around, again, refusing or resisting the urge to be reactionary and really focusing on trends in data and making stories from data about student learning rather than, acting immediately on what we may see within a single assessment cycle. And so ideally, I think you want to go through as many assessment cycles as possible before making any changes to your curriculum or individual assignments or pedagogical methods. But once you do reach that level of confidence that, yes, I can tell that things need to be changed in a certain way, the next complication for making that decision is what needs to be changed and where. Is it an assignment issue? Is it a course-wide issue? Is it a pedagogical methodology issue? Is it a technology issue? And so that can be another challenge, especially that we've encountered in pinpointing where things do need to be improved. And usually it's not in any single location, but the more data you have and the more assessment cycles you've gone through, it becomes easier and easier to answer that question. And of course, when you do apply any changes, you have to be sure to factor those changes into your future assessment plans to capture that continuous improvement. Another final element of our own assessment process is to assess our own assessment process, thinking critically about what might be missing from your assessment process. And right now, specifically, we've been talking about how we can further break down the data that Sarah showed you into perhaps, or kind of reflect it through a demographic lens. And she used the example of 57% of students in that end count are, achieving a 3 or a 4. But if we were to kind of push that data through a demographic lens, we may find that certain demographics of students are more likely to achieve a 3 and 4 than others. And so that kind of points to accessibility or equity related issues. And so we can kind of have those conversations about, why are certain demographics of students achieving this level when others are not? And how can we use that awareness to address our curriculum for the following year? Next slide.
Okay, so to wrap up, we just wanted to go through some of what we feel are the benefits to assessment and then specifically to our approach. The way that we go about assessment is a direct method, and just wanted to comment, there was a question about whether or not we collect data on multiple sections, and I don't want to speak for all program directors, but I know, I think in general we typically do. I know I often have multiple sections of the same course running, so it allows us to collect a lot of data and then do comparisons amongst courses, and then as Emily and Sarah mentioned, over time as well. It encourages rubric use, which helps to standardize the process and ensure that the students and the student work is being assessed consistently across the board. It leverages the pre-existing student motivation to perform well. So because these are assignments that are being graded for the course itself, the hope and the theory is that these students are putting forth their best work and hopefully demonstrating their understanding, and therefore giving us valuable data in terms of whether or not they really are meeting those competencies. And it's faculty driven, and closing the loop may be more likely because they are very much part of that process. Next slide. The way we approach assessment definitely helps to streamline data collection. All of our data goes into a data warehouse, and Sarah showed an example of what it would look like if it was exported to an Excel document. This screenshot shows our outcomes dashboard, which is a visual representation of that data. And we are able to filter by program, filter by course, and have a very clean snapshot of how our students are performing in each of the courses, and then for each of the outcomes. And it's easy to merge data together for multiple course sections. So again, addressing the ease of use in terms of the data collection. And it facilitates analysis and report generation. So we can export and utilize that data in a variety of ways, whether it's in a dashboard or through an Excel document. It's very easy to analyze and manage when you have multiple sections being assessed. And it also provides a permanent repository of the data. So hopefully, as we're going through the curriculum redesign process based on these assessments, we can then do a comparison in terms of students' success and student outcomes after these changes are made, to see if they really are making a positive improvement.
So thank you everyone for listening to how we set up our assessment process at the American Women's College. I realize now that in my enthusiasm, I did skip a little video demo that I had earlier in an earlier slide. So maybe we'll take some time for questions, and then if there's interest, I can show the video. But thank you again, and we'll open it up for questions. Some good ones have already come in through the chat, but if anyone has additional questions, please type them there. We just recently were chatting with someone asking, Jeff asked about which assessments are targeted for assessment, which assignments, excuse me, are targeted for assessment, and whether they're high or low stakes. And I'd have to say that it depends on the course. We try to work with faculty and with the existing assignments in the course. So if the faculty member feels that a particular assignment, be it high or low stakes, is best aligned with the outcomes for that course, then we go with their recommendation generally. Max is asking if we have rubrics for minors or certificate programs or concentrations. We use the AACU value rubrics for much of our core assessment, but we also have other rubrics that have been developed for different purposes. So Michelle, maybe you could speak to within the psychology program having multiple majors, but the way you've structured your assessment rubric.
Sure. For the psychology program, our program outcomes are based on the APA guidelines. And so the rubric that we used for assessment in all of our courses correspond with those APA guidelines and program outcomes. And so that's used for, we do have one certificate, and then students can minor in psychology. So that rubric is used in those courses. It's just, depending on the major or depending on the what we're assessing for, so that there's the different criteria. So one year we might be focusing on ethics and responsibility, for example. So that would be we would be using that portion of the rubric in particular courses. So the rubric as a whole isn't always used in every course every single time. It really depends on the particular course.
And to follow up on Michelle's comments, it also depends a little bit on program size. So if we have a smaller, say a certificate program that enrolls a smaller number of students, we might be able, feasibly to assess all of the students for all of the rubric criteria every year. But for our larger programs like psychology, they've had to strategize and do sort of a rotational approach. So it does vary at our institution a little bit by program to program. Emily, there's a question here, I think following up on your comments about delving into assessment data for conclusions about different student demographics. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I think that is our next step in assessing our own assessment processes, and our next step for how we can further leverage the data warehouse that Michelle mentioned. So we haven't delved into much of that yet, but I think going forward, we definitely want to be ensuring equity and accessibility as much as possible in our curriculum. And I think that breaking down the data further into student demographics is really going to help that. But yeah, I think that's our big next step. We haven't delved too much into that yet. And if anybody here has, definitely talk about it. I would love to talk about it. So
we're very proud of the dashboard that Michelle showed a screenshot of on one of her slides, but we're just sort of in the infancy of using the dashboard. So looking forward to when we can drill down even further into it and look at student characteristics. So we have a question here about rubric for an assignment and the course, and is it used by all faculty, or does it allow general classification? For example, do all faculty have to use the same criteria topic for an essay, or can faculty change the topic? So that's a great question, Jennifer. I think it was Michelle mentioned earlier in our presentation, one of the unique factors to our curriculum that may be different from a lot of the listeners today is that we do use a centralized curriculum. So the assignments used for assessment are standardized across all of the courses that are being assessed. So even if we weren't to collect data from all of the courses, they're all using the same assignment. We try to keep this especially consistent for assessment purposes. There may be other assignments and courses that do vary from course to course, but for assessment purposes, I'm not aware of any course where we allow variation, and maybe Emily or Michelle could speak to their programs, but I believe it's consistent.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's consistent. And I think it speaks to a little bit about what Emily was saying in terms of it being faculty driven and closing the loop. So as we go through these assessment cycles, we do have faculty provide feedback after each course that they teach in terms of the curriculum. And one of the things that we're looking at is the assessment and whether or not getting their feedback as to whether or not they feel as though it is accurately representing the students' competencies for those outcomes, or competency levels for those outcomes. And so if as we collect that information, it just becomes part of our decision-making process moving forward in terms of whether or not we need to adjust those assignments moving forward.
And a great question here came in from Dana, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, that segues from what Michelle was just saying. Was the assignment developed amongst the professors of each section, or did you have an assessment committee in the program area develop the assignment? I would say that our assignments are collaborative in nature, so it's not either or of those. Typically, the assignments are perhaps initially drafted by faculty or perhaps subject matter experts, depending on the course. And then assessment committee is there to provide guidance, and especially in the case where we're using a standard rubric, like one of the value rubrics, maybe tweaking the assignment to make sure that it's aligned with the rubric. Otherwise, as we discussed earlier, if you have misalignment, then the data that you're generating won't be very useful to you. So it's a collaborative process.
Yeah, and I guess to follow up on what Sarah is saying and to answer the next question in our chat, it is a collaborative process, and we facilitate instructor feedback through a centralized form that we link in every course section that they teach, that they can have immediate access to and fill out as much as they want throughout the session that they're teaching to send us feedback about curricular issues or suggestions or any other feedback that they have. And then that gets collected and sorted for us, the program directors, based on program in spreadsheets, so that we can use that data going forward, factor into our assessment plans.
And to kind of represent the broader perspective, our university has an assessment committee, and one of the initiatives that we're moving forward with is bringing on external advisory boards and working with members of the community from that discipline to give their feedback as well in terms of our outcomes and alignment, and making sure that our curriculum is actually preparing students for professions in their field. So that's another layer, and that takes place in our 5-year program review. But I think moving forward, it will definitely play a larger role in our year-to-year assessment as well, in terms of collecting that external feedback.
These were all great questions. Are there any others? We'll wait one more minute, maybe. Oh, I see Jeff in the chat there. Thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity to present today. We certainly hoped that it was going to be an in-person and perhaps more interactive presentation, but this was really enjoyable. I'm glad that we had the opportunity.
Sarah, there was a question about your video, the content of your video.
Oh, the video was just a recorded demo of me doing the actual assessment in Canvas. It wasn't super thrilling. I'm not a videographer by any means, but really was just an attempt to show you, rather than just by the screenshots, what the process looks like. So I'd be happy to share that with anyone when we share the slides out, if it's possible to do that via Jeff's system. I'll follow up with him. Well, I think that's it for us today then. Thank you, Jeff, and everyone for attending.